Hello everyone, Ruby Rovell here, Princess of Darkness, who is a governess over the deep, dark Stygian realms below the earth, where I preside over my hidden hoard of treasures. Here to talk to you today about son Trine Pluto. Now, the main myth that we have associated with Pluto is his rape and abduction of Persephone. Put briefly, Persephone was a beautiful springtime goddess and daughter of Demeter, whose job it was to revel in all of the joys and efflorescences of that vernal season where everything is bright and growing and full of fertile, rich promises of greater attainment. But just as she was hitting in her stride and enjoying this sunny season that felt like it would last forever, she happened to catch the eye of Pluto, who was rather upset that, unlike his Olympian brother Zeus, he did not have a wife or bride for his own. And being, deftly and invisible, he wasn't exactly the kind of partner that many gals would look at and go, that's him, that's the guy, that's the one, he's the one I want. So, in that typical Plutonic way, in order to get the woman he loved, he had to do things dishonestly and via skullduggery. And so he abducted Persephone against her will and took her down into the Underworld, which was the total opposite of everything that she knew. Instead of being this beautiful diurnal realm of infinite light and growth and possibility and beautiful and joyfulness and togetherness, she was instead taken into this realm in which no light could penetrate, where she was surrounded by torment and suffering, where everything was death, decay, and putrefaction. Now, I just want to stop right there in that point in the narrative and think a little more deeply about what it means to be abducted. An abduction is when we are forcibly taken by someone into a direction or place or area that we would not have gone to of our own volition. And in that sense, an abduction is also a rape and a violation, because it forces us to surrender our own will, to do something of our own choosing. It is the mutilation of our own sense of self-control by something that is too powerful for us to be able to resist. And Pluto transits very often can also feel like violations, in that it represents us having to also come into confrontation with deeper forces that are beyond our control, and the different ways in which we respond to that loss of control. Sometimes we encounter that in external events, when we are confronted with obstacles, oppositions, difficulties, crises, or unwanted changes and losses that we would never have chosen of our own volition. But very often he's more than capable of acting out his abductions on a psychological, emotional, and inner level, where it is not so much that we have been abducted so much of our minds, those times when we suddenly depart from the daylight realm of our own consciousness and our identification with the parts of ourselves that we like and that we feel comfortable showing and displaying to the world, where we suddenly find ourselves taken away from that and into the deepest, darkest pools within us, where we have to face and have reflected to us the parts of us that we feel are monstrous, shameful, that are a burden to us, that are sources of pain and torment, that we want to keep, not only keep other people from seeing, but sides of ourselves that we would also rather not see as well. The different parts of the Sun-Pluto cycle show us the different phases of our relationship with that process of fating the inevitable, of either wrestling or submitting willingly to our own fates. Now, during the outgoing square, which we experienced through the final 2/3 of April, usually indicates the times when we resist change, when we resist the inevitable, when we see that horrible monster or dragon looming on the horizon who seems to be threatening to destroy, devour, and caress with his ugly fingers of putrefaction everything that we're trying to protect and preserve and keep in this frozen paradise that we want to last forever. And we believe that if we don't look at this monster, or if we assert ourselves, then somehow our heroic son will come out trumps, that we will be able to beat the beast and keep things exactly as they are. But during that square, we eventually reach that breaking point where we accept the limitations of our own powers. And we don't usually do it graciously. Usually it involves a lot of pain, a lot of grieving and bereavement, and raging and howling against the cruelty of life, like King Lear in his endless soliloquies out on the heath, blowing into the wind. But once we reach the Trine phase, the resistance begins to ebb. We see the futility of crying or raging against something that is totally indifferent to our petty human rage, and we begin to engage with the problems of transformation more practically and methodically. We say to ourselves, okay, if change is afoot, if I do have to let go of the past and find some ways of remaking and regenerating myself in accordance with all that has gone on over the last month, then I will at least find a way of using that period fruitfully as a process of heroic becoming, as a recognized transition that could well be helping me to become a deeper part of myself that as yet has been unexpressed, because we don't necessarily appreciate that during the outgoing square phase of the process. We just know that something has happened, some kind of disaster, cataclysm, or inner outer crisis that we would have bribed reality itself to avoid occurring. And the very fact that it has occurred, that we see those nebulous tides of darkness coming in, creeping in to infect and necromantically inseminate everything that we would like to keep it away from, we find it very hard not to interpret that as just an act of cruelty and maliciousness in the hand of God that is punishing us for having the hubris to believe that we could ever make anything of ourselves, to believe that we could ever be a hero who could triumphantly remake the world in his own divine image. It just seems unfair and haphazard, and the fact that we rage and cry against it is the fact that in that moment our lights seem so darkened, so benighted and beclouded by what we've experienced that we struggle to see the meaning in what's happening and just totally relent to that grieving process instead. Whereas by the time of the train, some of those dust clouds and some of that initial sense of benightedness has abated enough that we begin to realize, oh, there may have been a purpose to this loss. There may have been a purpose to this change that I was trying to resist. Instead of trying to destroy and humiliate and embarrass and just downright lower this hero within me that I'm trying to become, maybe I had to lose those things and let go of the things to which I was attached in order to get where I need to go, in order to achieve my hero's quest and go on to the next stage of the adventure. We have to remember that this Trine begins with the Sun in Taurus against Pluto in Aquarius. So even though they're in Trine, it's an out-of-sign Trine. So initially the energies don't flow that well because sun in Taurus is very fond of his material attachments, of his belongings, of everything that he has called his own, of this little earthly paradise that he has made in his own image. It's almost like if we imagine the sun's heroic journey through the zodiac. In Aries, we have a lot of fighting and rabble-rousing and swaggering adventures, going on different quests, trying to assert ourselves and make ourselves feel strong and powerful. We fight the dragons and we win the gold and the damsels in distress. And it's almost like once the sun has reached Taurus, he goes, well, I've done pretty good as being a hero. I've got the lady, I've got the wealth, I've got the castle. Do I really need to go on any more quests? Can't my quest now just be enjoying the fruits of my labours and keeping them as I are? Can I, like Verdi after his many years of working in the galleys, making one opera after the other, can't I just spend some time now being a gentleman farmer, just relaxing in my vineyards and making love to my wife and having a stable, steady routine where very little changes day after day? Because, hey, if it ain't broke, why fix it? We're in the Shire, we're in Hobbiton, this is a prelapsarian paradise. Change has no place here. Change is something that we seek out when we're unhappy, but what have I got to be unhappy about? Everything's good here. I'm a damn earth goddess. There's no deeper unmet cravings here that I'm willing to admit to, but Pluto says otherwise. Pluto is in contact with our deeper soul, with the beasts within us that we've kept caged in order to make the rest of our life more peaceable and easy. And so while Taurus may initially look on change always as a misfortune, as a calamity, as a tragedy, as a horrible, horrific monster that is devouring his paradise and his beautiful pastoral meadows and threatening to turn his bounteous wonderland into a horrible wasteland mutilated by famine. Being an earth sign and therefore in touch with natural cycles, there is a begrudging stoical part of him that does accept that change is necessary, that winter will inevitably have to come. And here we're talking about a psychological winter, an existential winter, as opposed to a literal seasonal one. And once he's begrudgingly accepted that change is going to come, whether he tries to hold back from it or not, then he can put his practical mind on. He can start to use his energies wisely to go along with these changes rather than just fighting against them or just trying to go about his day-to-day business pretending they're not there. Instead, he can be methodical and he can say, okay, what can I do to facilitate this process? How can I go along with this change and make it work to my advantage so that I can actually come out of this as a braver, stronger person? But also the more monetarily minded side of Sun in Taurus can also remember that there's a lot of treasure in the underworld. And whilst we don't see that during the square phase, we just see the fact we've suddenly been pulled into darkness. During the trine phase, I think that's when we begin to see some of the jewels and the hidden hoards of gold and pools of residual wealth that have been stored up in Hades. And we begin to see there is something here. There is something here that I could take to the daylight world. There is something precious that, amidst all the howls and screams of the undead, is worthwhile and of value and is worth bringing to the light. So this is the point at which we begin to perceive that growth can arise out of decay, that the soil and fertility and the promise of the new earth is invariably built upon the bones of what went before. And yet we still can't allow ourselves to get our hopes up. We still can't permit ourselves to be too radiantly optimistic about what could potentially be developing up ahead, because it is in those first secretive, tentative stages of re-emergence after a period of darkness that we are at our most fragile. You know, a baby doesn't come out of the womb and say, all right, here I am, who wants to fight? It needs to spend a long time hiding with mother at home before it's ready or has enough mobility or autonomy to go out into the world and stand for itself in any kind of meaningful way. And the same is also true when, you know, trees and plants are just growing. A lot of the hard work goes into just putting down stable enough roots so that whatever fruiting body does come to the surface has enough going on below, anchoring it, that it can withstand some of the vagaries and vicissitudes of whatever difficult encounters it might discover once it does peep its head above the soil and look nervously out into that daylight world where unforeseen horrors and sources of opposition might lurk. So there is still that sense of Pluto whispering to the sun, right now, I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to help you to be reborn, to regenerate, to shed your own skin, to shed your old scales, and to become something else. But you are vulnerable while that process is going on. And there are other people who might take advantage of that to exploit you and hurt you at this time when you are most exposed. So you would do well to listen to me, son, and stop shining your sun out there and drawing attention to yourself. And keep it dark, keep it stumm, keep your true intentions and desires and inner light and radiance hidden from the world. Because if you go displaying it everywhere valorously and valiantly, you may take on more than you are ready to face right now. It is better to deal with things subtly and in a subterranean manner, as a way of not sabotaging yourself than giving away the game before it's ready to be given away. It needs more strength and solidity before it can face things that openly. And right now, I'm going to give you my helmet of invisibility so that you have that protection to stop you from being thwarted again during this difficult process of self-becoming. So during that time, we might feel a bit more suspicious of other people, a little less inclined to be trusting and open and warm and engaging with people. We're going to be, and those we do feel the need to do that with, we might carefully vet and inspect and really make sure we can trust them tactically and in a calculated way before we do open our mouths about whatever it is we're working to. We want things to work out. We don't want things to submit to disaster and to go back into the soil. And so we're unlikely to take a chance on something until we have assuaged our Pluto by telling him it's a certain thing. We have put all the right factors in place, we have done all the right careful preparations, we have manipulated and controlled what we can control as much as possible to the point where it looks like things are going to be okay. One of the positive aspects of this transit is that it gives us an obsessive drive, a strong willpower and an indomitable sense of resolve that keeps itself focused on whatever outcome or goal that is working towards. Like I said, during the square, we very often don't have a goal. It's more about relinquishing those that we've been attached to before. Whereas during the trine, we may have something new that we're working towards, or some hidden plan that we are now trying to achieve to give ourselves a sense of rebuilding and growth after whatever we've had to relinquish and abandon before. It might be, who knows, working towards a new job, a new relationship, to the reconciliation of some kind of crisis. Whatever the aim or agenda is, Pluto helps us keep our eyes on it at all times, to not permit ourselves to be distracted by anything that could throw us off course. Whereas we rage and grieve during the square, by the trine, we've gotten that out of our system. We've accepted what we cannot change. We've accepted what we lost. And now we're just focused on what it is that we can get out of this. And knowing that we are still in this delicate and fragile state, we armor ourselves as much as possible and just direct all our energies to that one given purpose. And this can give us a wonderful sense of focus and drive and clarity. So the sun in Taurus reluctantly leaves his withered garden of earthly delights and says, I don't really want to, but you know, the hero's journey is a journey. It's not a holiday, it's not a stasis, it's not a nice little neat comfortable home that remains forever. Being a hero involves being active, involves taking risks, involves engaging with challenges and tasks and labours and difficulties. We don't remember Hercules for his 12 years of staying comfortably in a Holiday Inn. We remember him for his 12 labours. And this is the point at which the sun on Taurus says, okay, I'm getting on my horse, I'm going to leave my pastoral meadowland behind, and I'm going to accept that I've got to fight more monsters, I've got to save and rescue more damsels in distress, I've got to meet more archetypal reflections of myself in the different fairy tale personages that I encounter in my life. There would be no Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit if they just stayed in the Shire. And right now I must head out and see what else there is in the world for me, even if I do so with trepidation and fear. But the breakthrough moment occurs around May 21st, when the sun reaches its exact trine with Pluto in Aquarius and enters into Gemini. And whilst Gemini is not exactly the best friend of Pluto, because Pluto rules the deep and the dark and the hidden and the secret and the forensic mining that we have to do under the earth to get to that hidden knowledge, whereas Gemini prefers the light and the airy and the free and the liberating and the curious and the apparent and all that is revealed and given freely to the mind. But Gemini still loves change and can embrace change and can engage with it curiously and with a sense of hope and joyfulness as something that could potentially reveal more knowledge to it. And while Gemini generally likes to ask questions and have the answers given to it straight away, assuming it sticks around long enough to hear them, which is usually not the case, he does have still an appreciation for knowledge as it comes. And I think once we reach that point, there may be a greater sense of engaging with that flow of regeneration more willingly and with a sense of the added flight and buoyancy that it could bring to our previously clipped wings. Anyway, I'm going to stop that there. If any of you would like to get in contact with me for spiritual counselling or advice, my email address is thestarsunraveled@outlook.com. You can follow me on Instagram at astrologyandunderwear, and you can support me generously on Patreon at www.patreon.com/thestarsunraveled.